Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Safe Communities Committee meeting on Tuesday, March 1st. We are going to be discussing, again, our Vision Zero neighborhood traffic calming policy efforts today with a hope of having something come back to us at our April meeting that we can take action on and send to the full council for consideration. So want to jump right into it. We'll start with introductions of the folks here in the room, and then we'll go to committee members online and other staff or guests online. So I am Larkin Eggleston, chair of the committee.
Emily Kunze, City Manager's Office.
Good afternoon, Debbie Smith, Charlotte Department of Transportation.
Hello, Tamara Blue, Charlotte Department of Transportation.
David Smith, Charlotte Department of Transportation.
Donata Jackson, Office of Constituent Services.
Committee members online.
Greg Phipps, Vice Chair, Committee Member.
Hello,
Renee
Matt Newton,
Johnson.
Committee Member.
Renee Johnson, District 4, Committee Member.
Tarek Bakari, Committee Man.
And other folks joining us online.
Julia Martin, City Manager's Office.
Deputy Chief Stephen Brochu, CMPD.
I believe that is everybody. So without further ado, we will jump into the discussion. Ms. Kunze, is there anything you want to cover before we hand it off to Ms. Smith?
No, I will just introduce, thanks. I'll just introduce the agenda item for the public. We're going to be talking about neighborhood traffic calming policy. CDOT will review the neighborhood traffic calming policy and ask the committee to consider amendments to the policy. Thank you.
Great, good afternoon. We are so glad to be here this afternoon. We're very excited to be talking to you about neighborhood traffic calming. This truly is one of our most popular programs that directly support the neighborhood. I'm going to turn this over in just a moment to Tamara Blue. She is our Public Relations Manager. We're bringing this forward based on a significant community interest to review the petition process. And so similar to other areas of Vision Zero, we're constantly scanning best practices across the country to determine how we can improve our efforts. So with that, many of you have worked with Tamara. She is our Public Relations Manager, and you know about her outstanding customer service. So with that, let me turn it over to Tamara.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you about the neighborhood traffic calming policy. Sorry about that. Am I good? Okay. We're here today to review the existing policy and discuss the petition process. Many neighborhoods and several council members have approached us with concerns about the petition process in particular. During this presentation, I'll describe our current process and share what we learned through some peer cities research. Next slide, please. The Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program is very successful and hugely popular with our citizens. The first policy was adopted in 1997, and over the last 25 years, councils before you made a couple of revisions to reduce thresholds to support more traffic calming in neighborhoods. The most recent update was in 2018, which removed the petition process for reducing the speed limit to 25 miles per hour, lowered volume thresholds for speed humps, and lowered the collective intersection volume for multi-way stops. Another important update changed the number of parcel owner signatures required on a petition. It was all owners of record at one time, and it was changed to only one owner of record. This was an important step in removing a cumbersome piece of the process where there were two or more owners on record for one address. Next slide. The neighborhood traffic calming policy covers three main areas: speed limit reduction, speed humps, and multi-way stops. There's also a condition where speed humps and multi-way stops may be installed in tandem, and I'll explain that in a moment. Next slide. These next few slides illustrate just how popular the neighborhood traffic calming program is, and we want you to see their locations throughout the city. This slide obviously represents 675 multi-way stops citywide. Next slide. And the blue locations represent about 1,935 speed humps installed to date. And green illustrates about 36 roundabouts or traffic circles. While this looks like a lot, next slide, there are still many new requests active in our system for evaluation today among 2,316 miles of local residential streets citywide. The 500-plus requests represented here are each on an evaluation path between newly received, they've met the requirements, or we're waiting for the return of a successful petition. They've returned a successful petition, and they await funding. The current neighborhood traffic calming policy requires the street to be signed at 25 miles per hour before any traffic calming elements can be considered. Volume and speed data are collected to qualify a street for either speed humps, multi-way stops, or a combination of both. Currently, when a street qualifies, we provide a packet that includes the parcel addresses within the impact area on a petition. Then the requester must carry the petition for original signatures. This might mean the petitioner has to go door to door in order to return a successful petition. This process places a burden on the public and might prove especially difficult in neighborhoods that are not formally organized or where there's a high number of renters. Next slide. The current policy does not consider cases where second traffic calming element is requested. If it has been less than 5 years since the initial installation of either a multi-way stop or a speed hump, the petition requirement would be eliminated and replaced with a postcard notification. Currently, this is the only condition where a petition is not required. We researched what our peer cities are up to in the neighborhood traffic calming realm and found that 5 of 8 do not use a citizen-led petition or ballot process. We also learned that overall, they are communicating what is coming to the neighborhood streets, so the inclusion remains, but the burden is removed. Finally, by removing the petition requirement, we increase equity among the neighborhoods, particularly those that have high number of renters. The implementation of an opposition-only process would mean that CDOT would issue appeal postcards to all parties within an impact area. The postcard will contain instructions to either email an appeal to Charlotte DOT at charlottenc.gov or mail the postcard to CDOT within 45 days of issuance. We believe that eliminating the petition requirement is a barrier removal that would allow neighborhoods citywide to receive equal opportunity for traffic calming installations when their streets meet the thresholds under the neighborhood traffic calming policy. At this time, we'd like to address any questions you may have. If you support these recommended changes, we could return to you in April with a red-lined version of the policy for your review. If you decide to move the policy changes to full council and seek their approval, that could happen as early as this summer. We would begin the process of reaching out to the neighborhoods to share any changes. That is all we have, and I open the floor to any questions.
Thank you. And if folks will just raise their hand in the WebEx chat, I'll watch there for questions. Can you talk a little bit more about if a person or persons were to receive that postcard and file opposition or state their opposition to traffic calming that was being advocated for, what would that process look like, and what are the thresholds for how many people oppose? How does that then get squared between neighbors who want something and neighbors who don't?
We would probably take that in, and we would review the reason for the opposition. We would try to stand on the data supporting a traffic calming element, and at that point, we would reach out to the neighborhood to find out if there were if there was any more opposition.
So beyond having a conversation between the people who want it and the people who don't, would there be some threshold we would set that said, if X percentage of people in the directly impacted area prefer to not have the traffic calming strategy implemented, then we cannot move forward? Or we would just ultimately make the decision not based on some black and white line in the sand of percentage of support, but simply based on whether or not city staff and or the council felt it was needed.
So Councilmember Eggleston, let me take that. So I think what we would do is really then always reserve that right to go back to a petition process to truly gauge the interest of the community with that situation. Sure.
Okay. I've got Mr. Newton and then Mr. Phipps.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tamara, thank you so much for that presentation. I really appreciate all that you do. As you know, I get a high volume of requests in my district for traffic calming, and you're always step up to the plate and hit not just home runs, but grand slams for District 5. So thank you so much for all of your hard work. I really appreciate the work in reviewing all this as well. I am very much supportive of the recommendations. I know it's not uncommon for the petition process, well, for traffic calming measures to stall in that petition process, at least in my district, because of rental homes and a difficulty in getting in touch with the owner. So that's something else that I think is a positive development here, us moving away from that petition process. Whenever someone does reach out to me and ask for traffic calming within their neighborhood, traditionally, and so this is kind of the way I viewed it. You know, we have this tiered process where we work from maybe a less intensive traffic calming measure upwards towards a more intensive measure. So effectively reducing the speed limit, then going up to a more intensive a more intensive use of like a three-way stop or stop signs, and then the speed humps. What stuck out to me was how the speed hump criteria is the same as the three-way stop criteria. And I don't want to sound as though either is more important than the other. It's not. Having said that, I did find that a bit strange that the more intensive or frankly less intensive traffic calming measure appears to have the same qualifications or criteria. And I was wondering if there has been any look or review of that criteria for three-way stops. I feel like we want to place as many traffic calming measures as we can where it's needed. And so I'm just wondering if, particularly from the standpoint of maximum volume of 600 vehicles, and then also the 85th percentile being 5 miles per hour over or not, have we re-reviewed that at all, particularly for three-way stops?
Hello, Mr. Newton. I'd love to take that question. And so we haven't done any recent review beyond when council approved our lower thresholds back in 2018. So that really was the opportunity that we had to evaluate those thresholds. And to be honest, what we find with a lot of neighborhoods is that some are in more support of the traditional speed humps, and others are more comfortable with the multi-way stops. And so in addition to that, we work really closely with the fire department in order to find that best fit approach to the neighborhood.
I feel like the three-way stop in particular could be considered low-hanging fruit because it's certainly less expensive. So not necessarily any less effective, but less expensive for us. And I look at how we want to do all we can to prevent, to protect motorists and pedestrians or what have you on our streets. That's the whole point of Vision Zero. And I'm just wondering, at what point are we saying that speeding is acceptable? Because we're looking at this and you know, we have this 5 mile per hour over threshold. And I could see where certainly with more expense associated with speed humps, which it's my understanding we're paying for, which is also a positive development that I think is a byproduct of what we approved back in 2018. But yeah, I could see where, you know, where we have kind of this balance we're trying to strike. But I'm just wondering if it's something as as less expensive or inexpensive as putting up a stop sign. Do we want to stick to a threshold where we're saying that speeding 85 percentile at 5 miles per hour over is acceptable? So anyhow, I put that out there as a notion, but I guess my question is, what is that challenge there? Like, how much more do you think volume and requests would we receive, or what burden would that place upon us as a city to fulfill current requests if we were to reduce that 5 miles per hour threshold?
Certainly, Mr. Newton. I mean, that's a great question. As we've scanned most of our other peer cities that have neighborhood traffic calming, what we're really finding is that most of them are consistently using the 85th percentile speed, which what that is a measure of 85% of that traffic is going at that speed or slower. And so certainly a lot of our community conversations have been around that number. I did want to also mention that thanks to the great support of council as well as the community, Vision Zero is the program that we use to fund the neighborhood traffic calming. So that's where we do fund that. With our current requests, as Tamara showed you, we have over 500 active requests going through this process. And so it is going to be important that we do focus on those locations that have what I'll say is the highest and most egregious speeding in their neighborhoods. And so I do think that keeping a threshold is an important value in order to prioritize. Certainly the director the director of transportation has the authority to set those speed limits at 25 and to make considerations with that. But we do, take that very seriously.
Yeah, I get a lot of reports from residents within my district. I would assume that some of my colleagues, district reps, probably get many reports themselves from residents who have requested stop signs. I understand the challenges in time associated with obtaining speed humps, but have requested stop signs and find themselves in a position where they're not quite meeting that threshold, a threshold that is identical to the speed hump threshold, by the way. But then also there are wrecks and accidents that occur during this waiting process, and I just kind of feel like the understanding that it is a less intensive, less expensive use, maybe we can reassess the parameters for that particular threshold. Also understanding too that all speeding, in my estimation, it is a bad, unsafe thing, and that the current thresholds appear, in as much as the stop signs are concerned, to create or accept or allow a certain measure of speeding in their own right. So I think it's worth reviewing that. I'm very supportive of the recommendations, but would also ask that we do a little bit more of a deeper dive into that 85 percentile at 5 miles per hour over threshold, in particular, and possibly even look at the 600 traffic count as well.
So to Mr. Newton's point about intersections where there might be frequent accidents, even if they're not meeting either the traffic count or the speed percentile, is there anything, if in one of his instances where we had an intersection that had a disproportionate number of accidents, I hope that CDOT is going and saying, okay, well, we've tested it, it's not speed, we've tested it, it's not volume of traffic, but what is it? Are cars parked too close to the intersection and it's a visibility issue? Is there a tree branch that's blocking the way you can see through the intersection? How do y'all handle a situation like that? Because I do think we've got to prioritize where that demonstration of more speeding and more volume is statistically demonstrated. But to Mr. Newton's point, those might not be the only criteria we want to consider for what is an unsafe intersection. And And I certainly think that if we were to clear the backlog of ones that did qualify, that we would then go, okay, maybe we should look at some others that didn't previously, now that we've got some bandwidth to do it. But how do you handle intersections where there are frequent wrecks but not meeting those other markers?
Sure. So Chair, great questions, and you hit on exactly, it sort of takes it out of that neighborhood traffic calming process, and we really are looking at it from a safety evaluation standpoint at that time, and we would conduct multiple field investigations as well as looking at the police reports to understand if there are conditions that are making it unsafe. So exactly like you described, do we have something blocking the intersection sight distance otherwise that involves tree limbs, vegetation, is there a fence, whatever those conditions are. We first work to remedy those, and then if we find that we can't quickly remedy those, then we do have the option to do multi-way stops for that reason.
Thank you. Mr. Phipps, I see your hand.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the recommendations slide.
Mr. Phipps, do you have a slide number? Oh, there-
Slide number 12.
Yeah. Okay, so on that second bullet, when you say neighborhood request based, so I mean, is that saying then that we are setting the standard where it might, it would preclude one individual or a couple of individuals from initiating such a request, that there would have to be more of a broad-based neighborhood request?
No, Mr. Phipps, what we are indicating with that second bullet is really in support of that first. So what we'd like to do is remove the petition requirement, but what we as CDOT are not going to do is go out and actively identify. We're still going to be responsive to a single citizen that contacts us to do that evaluation. So that's what that second bullet is implying, is it's still neighborhood requested, and that can be a single individual.
Okay, because I'm concerned that a single individual could impose such a standard on the entire neighborhood. You know, that gives me some pause, because I don't know how the interest of the other neighbors or whatever, how is their interest preserved in this process if one person could initiate such an action?
Absolutely, Mr. Phipps, great questions. And so with the postcard, so once we receive that request from the citizen, we still would go through and make sure the street is posted at 25 miles an hour. And then after that, we would do our data collection and ensure that it is eligible for a traffic calming device. And then after that is when we would send out the postcards to that 1,200 feet within, in close proximity. And then it is at that point that we would find out if there are residents that do not support that. So it's up to the residents that do not support it to respond to that postcard.
And is that what triggers an additional due diligence then?
You are
the
correct.
opposition?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
It seems like a good time to plug my favorite thing to tell people about, which is anybody who's watching who's wondering how they can make such requests, download the CLT Plus app. Amazing things you can do from there related to traffic and tons of other city services. So I can't recommend that highly enough. Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to compliment Tamara Blue. She always does a phenomenal job, as everyone in CDOT does, including Liz Babson, the director. So the level of service really does start at the top. So thank you, first of all. I have a question about the process. Is current or pending development a part of the consideration? are you looking at the growth of the area as you're considering the approval process? Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for those positive comments, and you're absolutely right. Our director sets that customer service expectation from the top. We have a fantastic director. And yes, I will say that we have had a lot of conversation internally with new development as it is coming online. But for right now, this policy is just looking at existing residential streets, but would be happy to continue having that conversation as new development is coming online.
And I don't mean new streets, I mean new development on existing streets.
Like the
So,
traffic generation of new development, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. We absolutely take that into consideration as we are evaluating if a street is meeting those warrants. We're looking at that new development that would be coming in on that existing street. We do.
So that's actually a part of the process to look at pending petitions, because I think that's so important. We know that the traffic study is not prompted unless there's, X number of traffic or new traffic, it's 2,500. But in District 4 and in all of the districts, we know that there's cumulative effects that have increased the traffic without triggering a traffic study. So I think this is a great proposal, but I would really want to uplift that CDOT is considering the recent growth and future growth that's in the pipeline as the considerations are made. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. When we have constituents reach out about state-maintained roads and need for traffic calming there, what is the process for us to advocate for residents to advocate for traffic calming that might be on a state-maintained road?
So for right now, what we do, Chair, is work very closely with the state. So the state does not install traffic calming. Most of the residential streets that we're dealing with are city-maintained.
But in an instance where we do have streets that are some commercial, but also have residential along them, obviously we're not going to be putting speed bumps on state-maintained roads. But where there is calming needed on those, and maybe that falls outside of this program, I guess, so maybe it's not the right time of the question, but I just wondered what, if anything, we do to advocate for increasing the safety on some of those state-maintained roads, because as you well know, the average person in our community doesn't differentiate between I-77 and I-85 and a road, but they might not differentiate between South Boulevard and, North Tryon or any other street that they see that as a city street.
Right, right. We work really closely with the North Carolina Department of Transportation and look for opportunities. But I will say the toolbox is a little bit more limited on NCDOT roadways. Sure.
Mr. Phipps, did you have an additional question?
Yeah. An example of, I guess, a state-maintained road traffic calming, we were successful, CDOT was successful in persuading NCDOT to lower the speed limit on Sugar Creek from 45 miles an hour to 40 miles an hour. So that was something that was done on a state-maintained road. But my question is with the fire department. How much deference do we give the fire department in their evaluation of whether or not to install speed humps?
Our partners with Charlotte Fire Department, hugely important. And so what we've been able to do is work very closely with them on a slightly modified design to that road hump that helps with slowing traffic down, but also helping them meet their response times. So we work very closely with Fire Department with this program.
Do we have many instances where the fire department was just totally against installation of speed humps in certain areas?
I will
in certain neighborhoods?
Yes, Mr. Phipps. So there are some roadways that are classified as very important collector streets going in and out of the neighborhoods. I will say we work very closely with the fire department to understand the impacts to response times. And we're usually able to find a compromise with them. It may not always be in the way of speed humps, but it is through other traffic calming measures, such as reducing the lane widths or adding some additional features there.
Thank you.
And if folks will help me by lowering their hands if they no longer have questions. I think Mr. Newton's hand was down and now it's back up. Mr. Newton, did you have another question?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and I think that the implementation of speed cushions is really going a long ways towards mitigating the concerns of our emergency vehicle access for when we do implement speed humps. But I just wanted to echo Ms. Johnson's sentiments because I think she makes such a great point. Certainly from the standpoint of all the great work that you do in CDOT, Tamara and Liz, et cetera, but also from the standpoint of our measurables and deliverables today. We're growing exponentially as a city, and I just couldn't agree more that what we see today, what we measure today, aren't always necessarily a reflection of what we know we'll be experiencing in the future. And so, to the extent that we can look at that growth in a more, I guess, specific locale to determine what the traffic patterns, counts, speeds can be in the future, and then be more proactive in preventing the safety or lack thereof. So kind of the dangerous situations that might present themselves in the future, I think would be the most effective way of approaching our Vision Zero goals and our traffic calming goals as well. I don't quite know how we bake that in, but so long as we start to think about that today and implement that in policies tomorrow, I think that that's going to be the best approach. And I just couldn't have agreed with her more. And I just wanted to just echo that and throw my support behind what Ms. Johnson said.
Thank you, Mr. Newton. Ms. Johnson, is your hand up again with another idea or another question?
I was just going to add, and this is off the subject of the neighborhood calming. If we, Mr. Chair, if we could have a presentation from CDOT regarding the mitigation process for state-owned roads, because that is it's a huge issue throughout the city, but in District 4. So I'd love a follow-up presentation from CDOT to hear what that traffic mitigation process is in partnership with NCDOT.
Yeah, and I think we could probably, without too much difficulty, get one of our friends from NCDOT to join us to answer some of those questions as well, because I'm sure they have efforts that our folks at CDOT might be aware of, but maybe we as council members are not as apprised of as we are all the great things that are happening here at our local Department of Transportation. So I think that would be really helpful if someone from NCDOT could join y'all at some point to answer some of those questions and make sure we know and the community knows the things they're doing on those streets that, again, I don't think the average citizen differentiates between being state roads or locally maintained roads. I'm not necessarily looking to take over any of their roads because I don't know that we have the bandwidth for that in our budget, but I do want to know what they're doing with them, and we do, obviously, the people in our city are impacted by whether or not those roads are safe the same way they are with the ones that we are in control of. So I think that's a good idea, Ms. Johnson, and I think we could probably do that pretty easily. So we will. Did Ms. Martin or Chief Brochu, did you have anything you wanted to add to this discussion today? I appreciate y'all being on with us. And Mr. Phipps, I see your hand again. We'll make sure we get to you before we wrap. We're going to give y'all back some time today with a short meeting, but I want to make sure Ms. Martin or Chief Brochu had the opportunity if they wanted to chime in.
All good for me. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. The only thing I would chime in on is that kudos and support to CDOT for the great work they do across the board. We're just as appreciative of everything that they put forward. So, but we don't have anything else of substance in particular to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We appreciate what y'all do to keep our streets safe as well. Mr. Phipps, you want to bring it home.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize, for those neighborhoods like mine that do have traffic calming protocols in them, that these traffic calming devices are not panaceas in and of themselves. We have speed humps, and we have three-way stop signs, and we have a 25-mile-an-hour speed limits, but we still get complaints about speeding, running those stop signs. So it all depends on, behavior. I mean, driver behavior is still critical in terms of meeting those posted speed limits and just obeying those traffic signs and taking care when you go over those speed humps. So just because you get the traffic calming, it might deter some people, but we still got some speeders in the neighborhood.
We've been getting a lot of complaints from your neighborhood in particular about a silver truck with a black racing stripe on it that's been behaving badly. So we'll have to, Chief Brochu, if you can look into that vehicle, I think that might be the source of many of the problems in that neck of the woods.
Absolutely. We actually have him on license plate reader, and the helicopter typically follows him around too. So
Somehow he's been accessing the government center parking garage, so you can find him in there from time to time if you're looking for him. So if we don't have any other further questions, that wraps up our discussion today, and we'll hopefully have these, not hopefully, we intend to have these recommendations brought back to the full to the full committee next month, that we can then move them forward to the council for potential adoption. So I appreciate all of your time today. If anybody wants to make a motion to close, we can get back to the rest of our day.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Thank everybody for joining us, and we will see y'all again soon.